Joe already gave me. First, I want to thank APICS for letting me speak tonight. I think it's a great honor to be up here talking. This is my first time, so be gentle on me. But it's a great honor to speak in front of you. I'm preaching to the choir here, but obviously APICS is a very valuable organization with certifications. A lot of people look for it. It's important to have. I already had an introduction. I'm currently at NicePack Products and Senior Supply Chain Manager over there. I deal with a lot of the master planning and inventory management. So everything that's involved that involves getting the right amount of product at the right time is what I currently do. And I chose this subject because it's near and dear to my heart. And it's always a challenge anywhere you go in the CPG environment. And that's what. It's always a challenge anywhere you go, and I enjoy that challenge of keeping inventory where it's supposed to be. As I said, everything else Joe Savino already introduced me on, so we don't need to go through the rest of my resume here again. Our agenda tonight, we're going to be talking about the importance and definition of a good inventory plan. Key data requirements to develop those inventory targets. Formulas and applications of those key data, and other considerations towards total inventory targets. When we go through this entire plan, there's always going to be exceptions to the rule, and we're going to go over some of those exceptions as well. You shouldn't take anything that you do at face value. There is no one size fits all, but this is a pretty decent plan in terms of making it where it has to be. Much of what you're going to be reviewing tonight it might be a back to basics for some of you if you've been doing inventory planning for more than a couple days. Establishing inventory targets is nothing new. Almost all MRP systems have the ability to set inventory targets of some sort, to give you the exception reporting you need to keep inventory where it's supposed to be. But not many people apply, they're defining what, it tells you what they should be. You can tell it what to be, but not a lot of them tell you where they should lie. Now, if you have an opportunity to use a system like John Galt or Logility, and SAP's APO now has that ability where if you can leverage the data to give you where your target should be, it's still a good idea to understand how it's calculating those numbers and challenge it to make sure that it's giving you the results that you want. And we're going to finish up with some questions at the end, which I'm sure you'll have. So, looks like a pretty smart crew that's here. I'm going to start out with a quiz. And the winner of the two questions that I've got are going to be handing out these flash drives. Now, on these flash drives contain the tool that we use that will plan safety stock targets if you have the right data to leverage, and it's going to be involved everything that we're going through tonight. It leverages the data in the simplest way possible. It can be pretty complex, but it has the ability to, if you can put the data in here, to tell you what your inventory target should be. So again, the quiz goes on, and I'll hand this out. The rest of you guys, you can email me. My email is going to be up on the screen. I'll send it to you in Excel, and you can use this tool to build an inventory plan like we've done at NicePack. Because we don't have the advanced planning systems there, this tool has come in extremely handy, and we plan close to $700 million using it. So I'll hand that out. So the first question that I have that I'll throw out to you guys, please raise your hand. Name two key pieces of information that are required to calculate safety stock. You.
Demand forecast.
Okay, I'll accept that.
And review cycle.
What?
No, actually no, not review cycle. Demand forecast and your history of consumption.
History of consumption. So you're saying shipments versus forecast. Forecast error. Demand variability.
Yes.
I'll accept that. So here you go. Winner, chicken dinner. So 4 key pieces of information that you need. You named out the 2 at the bottom, forecast volume and actual shipments. You need those 2 to develop your forecast error or demand deviation in demand. Supply variability is the other one. There's a supply variability component in this calculation that we'll be talking about. Total replenishment lead time. That's cycle time plus anything else that you need that tells you, when I say I need more product, I'm telling you now I need it, how long does it take to become available to ship to a customer? And your desired customer service level. The desired customer service level leads into my next question. This is multiple choice. So, what is the relationship between inventory safety stock levels and customer service levels? Is it A, linear, B, variable, C, exponential, or D, regressive? Anyone? Winner, winner, chicken dinner. It's also referred to as the Z-score in the equation. There is an exponential relationship between inventory stocking levels and your desired customer service levels. So it's an important factor of taking into consideration when you're planning out your inventory and where you want it to be. As I said, for tolerating me, listening to me over the next 45 minutes, the rest of you can email me at this address, and I'll make sure I send the tool over to you guys as well. You'll come see me afterwards. Okay, so operations planning scenario. Talking about kind of where we're leading into with NicePack. Imagine that you're brand new into a job. You've taken a supply chain manager job at a new company. You've been working there about 2 weeks. You're sitting in your office going through KPIs or trying to understand the business a little bit better, and the VP of operations, your boss, is sitting in the office next to you. You know coming on board that they've had some issues with customer service levels. They're not servicing the customer as much as they would like. There's also some growing inventory problems that are surfacing in the company. It's a rapidly growing company, highly profitable product. So a lot of these supply chain issues are sort of downplayed or not very much downplayed. They're not made a big deal. But you're sitting in your office, and the chief financial officer and the VP of sales go storming into the VP of ops office. The door slams. You hear a bunch of expletives. Forecast is, or the customer service level sucks. Expletive. Inventory's too high. Expletive. And this goes on for about 30 minutes. They come walking out. VP of ops comes into your office, sits down, and says, "Look, I know you're new here and everything, and you know we've got some challenges here, but how much inventory should I have? I need to know how much inventory I can have to make sure my customers are serviced well, and make sure that we don't have too much. I keep the CFO off my back." What would you answer? What would be your answer to that question? Anybody?
What's your desired customer service level?
Now, that's one part of it. That's not a bad answer. But he's probably looking for something a little more detailed. He wants to know an action plan in terms of what are we going to do. So this doesn't happen overnight. It's going to take you a little while to build up this scenario, but that's what we're going to talk about tonight. At NicePack, Joe Servino can vouch for me on what we've done. Our situation and challenges when I first arrived there over 5 years ago is that one of the challenges we had were safety stock targets were reactionary. That's not uncommon. The pain for having not enough inventory to supply your customers is usually much higher than the pain you feel when you have too much. So if you've got some squeaky wheel out there saying we don't have enough to service our customer because maybe the forecast accuracy isn't the greatest, a lot of times you'll say, okay, fine, up to safety stock by another 2 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever, to do that, just to stop the music from coming from sales or the CEO or whoever that to supply these customers. Inventory targets were silos between operations and finance, and there is a disconnect between top-level inventory goals and item goals. Another situation that at NICEPAC that we'd run into is that you have the plant marching at one beat. They're building what they think they need to do to keep the customer in stock. That's where they feel most of the pain. You have finance that are taking snapshots of the inventory, weekly or monthly, which operations should be doing too. And they come in and at some point late in Q3 somewhere and they say, whoa, we have too much inventory. We've got to shut everything down right now. We've got to come up with a plan to reduce our inventory. We've got less than 3 months to do it. We need to do this right now. This type of inventory planning does not bode well either for the customer that you're trying to service or the company at keeping the plants running well and everything else. It's not a good situation. Often, the plan was fixed on a single value that ignored cycle times. How many times have you heard, well, how much safety stock do you keep on hand? 30 days, 4 weeks. What does that mean? If 4 weeks is your minimum? Is 4 weeks your average? What do you mean when you say that? This goal, every inventory goal you should have a min and a max. The average is given at aggregate levels, but if you're doing it at item level, you have a minimum level where you say, I've got to produce now to get more, buy more, to have more to supply, and you have a maximum level that you go up to when you're planning these items. So our results, as I was talking about, too much of items that not needed, high excess and obsolescent risks. You got too much of things you don't need and not enough of everything else that you need. Poor customer service levels, we touched on, and overgeneralized safety stock goals. One of the other things that we have that is common that I've heard, Target, we work with the big box retailers and CPG. We work with, this customer would come to us and say, you need to make sure you have 8 weeks on hand at all times. Okay, why? Why are you telling me that we need 8 weeks? Customers will try to dictate with you. If you want to be our partner with us, you're going to keep 8 weeks on hand. Well, 8 weeks might be way too much on an A item that you produce every 1 to 2 weeks, or it may be way too little items on an item that you get from China and the lead time is 16 weeks or more. It's not good to just say you need to make sure you have 8 weeks on at all times. And that's where you build your partnerships with your customers to come up with a better reason and tell them, no, this is what we're going to keep on hand and this is why we need to. And the promise you make to them is that you will keep your customer service levels at what you guys agree to in order to service them the best way. Any questions at this point? All right, keep going. Might be a good sign, might not be a good sign. All right, so the definition of a good inventory plan. So this is what it feels like. And if you're really getting involved with it, you've got sales and finance in a tug of war with each other in terms of how much finance is trying to push your inventory down, sales is trying to push your inventory up. You guys, operations is usually stuck in the middle. A good inventory plan is one that efficiently maximizes customer fill rates as close to 100% while also minimizing inventory carrying costs. It is, by definition, the management of opposing goals. That's what you're trying to do. You've got to get that sweet spot in that inventory that satisfies finance and also satisfies sales on their fill rates, customer fill rates. Another way that I look at this is I like to compare the difference between operations planning and sales like these two vehicles. Operations is like a freight train, all right? It takes a while to get that thing up to speed. And once it's there, you can't just stop on a dime. Sales can. They're driving the Ferrari. They're always flashy anyway. I don't know how you guys, how many people here are sales? Ah, excellent. My brothers and sisters in arms here. When I was in the military, I used to, I worked doing logistics and supply planning, purchasing in the military. I wasn't one of the trigger pullers like Gary. I was busting down doors and going after the enemy. I made sure they had enough bullets, they were well fed. It's not the most glamorous job, but it's pretty important. So, but I used to grumble a lot when I first got in for a while that, you know, the infantry guys were the guys that were always always marching, always getting off early if they weren't in some training exercise or busting down their doors somewhere. They were the ones that got out of all the, pardon my language, but crap work that would get stuck with all the people that did combat service support like me. So I remember my boss one day coming in and saying, Joe, listen, I understand that sometimes you're not going to always be doing things in the military you don't like. Just remember, you're here to support the infantry. That is your job. Everyone that is not infantry, you're there to support them. So when I got out of the military, I went in and I replaced infantry with sales, and it's worked out pretty well for me. So anyway, the idea of a good operations manager will apply the quality processes and methodology to reduce cycle times and supply variability as much as possible. So as an operations manager, to help this vehicle match that vehicle, you're trying to reduce your cycle times, you're trying to improve OEE rates wherever possible. The more capacity you get on anything that you run is a good thing to support your business, and try to produce as much flexibility in your production schedules as well. You schedule an item that's supposed to run every 30 days, or if you can run it every 2 weeks if necessary on a pinch, that will help support sales better. A good demand manager will do the same to achieve as high a forecast accuracy as possible. That's why those demand managers are paid so much money. You always want to make that forecast as accurate as possible. By applying statistical forecast modeling, CPFR is a big thing these days within companies to help partner with the customer. And product life cycle management is a big deal too to avoid obsolescence. Building expectations for launches and exiting inventory or exiting SKUs as efficiently as possible so you don't wind up with excess. But for everything else that you can't match this vehicle speed, as good as your forecast may be, as great as your production planning may be in terms of making it as flexible as possible, you're probably never going to be perfect at matching these vehicles. For everything else, there's safety stock. You have to have something there. Unless you're a made-to-order type program, or you can get your forecast accuracy to 100% with no supply variability, it's a smart idea to have safety stock. And the magic is building what you're going to, what that safety stock should be. What a good inventory plan will do. It collaboratively defines customer service goals. You do not define, you yourself as the operations manager, probably not by yourself, are going to define what those customer service goals are going to be. You could say everything's got to be 99%, but once you work the numbers, and keeping it 99% means that you have to keep inventory 50% higher than anybody wants to do, that might not be realistic. Our A customers, we have to keep them at 99%. But what about our B's and C's? Can we keep them at 96, 97, 95? What can we do to help achieve that balance between the min and the max? You define min-max targets where you have both a proper forecast in place and measure both forecast error and supply variability. You really can't define a good inventory plan if you don't know what you need. So if you're in a program where they don't have a good, you can't measure your forecast and your forecast error very well, it's going to be kind of tough to understand how much inventory you should keep on hand. So you need to have a forecast of some sort in place and measure the error off of that, how well you did to plan, so that you can define these goals. Builds a framework for top-line inventory goals. This is a bottom-up approach. It starts at the SKU level and builds it all the way up. By doing it this way, it's a lot of work, but by doing it this way, you have great flexibility in how you slice and dice the data, how you roll it up into those top-line inventory goals that your organization needs. Improves plant planning to increase OEE. All right, so a couple months ago, listening to John Gallucci speak, a lot of you guys know him in here. He was a great mentor. He did great at NicePack at introducing a lot of these forward concepts that help move NicePack to the next level. And one of the things that he introduced was this tool that I'm offering to you guys as well, that defined this min-max. And a couple months ago when he was speaking at an IDF conference, I remember him talking about a story about how he was talking about the relationship between the role of good communication between the demand planners and managers and the plants to ensure that enough inventory, or that communication flow was very effective. And I remember him saying he kept on focusing on. I just remember that story sticking in my head because it made such a profound impact. With someone came up to me. He kept on going on about it, saying the result was either improving the quality of life of the plant workers, or I don't know, solving peace in the Middle East. I don't know, but it stuck with him because the plants, when he came up with this good plan, this communication that went down, rolling the forecast as accurate as possible to the plants, it helped smooth out what the plants did. One of the issues that poor inventory planning results in is that you end up yanking the plants around in ways that is extremely inefficient. If you have too much inventory where it involves shutting them down, then you have no one working. Like, it upsets if you got hourly employees that are out there that don't have any work at all, that doesn't bode well for keeping quality people around. If you don't have enough, you end up spending a lot of money on overtime and upsetting the employees in the same fashion. Having a good inventory plan to help manage those ebbs and flows, or that demand variability, to keep the plants running in an efficient manner is beneficial, not just to the workers, but to the company itself and saving money. If you work with third-party manufacturing, it avoids having to pay a lot of extra money to getting product expedited, or paying for them to break into their production schedules. And of course, it benchmarks results to ensure the plan is effective. I could talk up here all day about calculations and this mathematically makes sense, but at the end of the day, if you apply this, you have to measure what its success is. Otherwise, it's just talk. So you should be benchmarking the result of what you're applying so that you can measure whether or not it's successful. And if it's successful, great. You keep improving it wherever you can. If it's not, you look at a way that why is it failing? Why is this not working for us? And then build a different plan that will make it more effective. What a good inventory plan will not do. It will not eliminate stockouts, but it will eliminate most of them. When we go into the numbers here in terms of the calculations, the idea in where you have forecast demand variability, or forecast error, and supply variability, those two combined make it extremely difficult to say that I'm going to keep you in stock 100% of the time. It's just not realistic. Most industry that you're in with CPG accept like 99% or 99 point something percent, but keeping at 100% in-stock rates where you have demand variability is pretty difficult. So whenever a sales guy comes to you and tells you, this stock can never run out, it must always be in stock, we have to always supply this one. I come back and say, well, then give me a forecast accuracy of 100%, and then I can work with you. So if they can do that within your cycle times, then you've got something. Or if you have a made-to-order type system, then you can do that as well. It's not a universal solution for all safety stock requirements. So when we go through the numbers, this works pretty well with most SKUs. As a general rule, it does. But there are situations you might be in for where, and we'll talk about those exceptions again, but you should challenge this as well. If you're looking at it and something's not working, for example, obviously you need all the demand inputs, or all the inputs for the data in order to make this work. But there might be situations where you need to carry either more safety stock or less safety stock for whatever reason, and you can adjust the formulas as needed. This plan is demonstrated for finished goods, but it can be applied for raw materials with the right data. I'm on a time limit here, so we're probably not going to get too much into the raw material piece of it, but again, this tool that we've been using and the data inputs are very similar. And if you can measure, input the same type of data, you can apply this for anything, raw materials or finished goods. All right, so defining the process. Now we talked about that scenario in the beginning where that operation or the VP came into your office and told you how much inventory should I have. So most of the legwork is in this right here, the data gathering at item level. You have to get together and you have to say, to have a general idea, you have to build this plan by gathering all the data inputs by item and putting it into this utility to tell you where your min-max target should be. And you have to know that information. And then once you have that plan put in place, what you should do is you should have a calibration with your group, finance, and sales. Sit down and say, look guys, I did all of this. This is how much inventory we should have to keep us within these customer service target level. And when you sit down, finance and sales has this buy-in on what you're doing. And this way, if there's questions later on or challenges later on, you knew what they signed up for, and you're not doing it in a vacuum. You might sit down with them and finance might say, no way, inventory is $10 million over where it should be. You need to do something to lower it. Or you might go in there and if you've got the data collated by customer or item, you might have sales come in and say, no, we can't have these items at 95% customer service level. They need to be closer to 99. So this type of calibration that you do between finance and sales to come up with this inventory target is critical in the entire process. And if you already know their goals, then it's just a matter of presenting it to them and all of them blessing off on it. And so after you've gone through to do that, you've got to you group your inventory targets by customers, vendors, or whatever. That'll help you better decide how much you need to keep of each item. You layer in the other inventory outliers. If you're like most, I'm sorry.
I just have a question.
Yeah.
So I'm a supplier to a lot of manufacturers, and we have an issue with customers that they put their consumables together and it's not included on their bill of materials, and then they're running out of things and reacting all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Have you had that happen in terms of places you've worked, and how do you coach them into making sure that all of the consumables that might have lead times are included in bill of materials so they can do forecasting on everything?
So you're saying that the bill of materials aren't set up. They don't know.
The consumable parts, the
Yeah.
inexpensive things that they think they can get
Ah.
readily that they
Okay,
can't.
so-
That's what I mean. So the majority of the expensive items are set up, but the consumables are not, and then they're stuck because sometimes they're.
I understand what you're talking about, and we do have interesting challenges for that as well. First of all, the items that you're talking about should be in the bill of material. So finance should back up that type of or accounting. The guys that control the money should support that because that goes into the cost of the item. So that you're talking about is dependent demand. So it's not really you're not really forecasting and building safety stock on those items. You do need it, but you need to get the right demand signals to those items in the first place, so that they know what they need and when they need it. So the easiest solution to what you're talking about is have it set up in the bill of material. If they have an MRP system that's worth a spit, they have the demand will flow into those items, and you can and it will tell you how much you need and when you need it.
But that's step one. They have to be on the bill of materials no matter what the cost.
If they don't keep it in the bill of materials, there are other ways you could do it, but it's costly. And you could sit there and say you could have you could have reorder points. You could sit there and say, based off if you measure the demand on those items that aren't in the bill of material, there's a demand on them somehow. They're being consumed.
That's right.
If they measure that demand and then it gets down to a certain point, they know based off lead time when they have to reorder it. That's one way of doing it, but I don't recommend it. I would recommend it being in a bill of material. What do you got, Megan?
You can also ask your customer to give you a visibility to the history, and then you can plan based on that.
Yeah, that's the movement towards CPFR.
Go
Yeah.
to your
Or-
min-max, and then you just get
Ask them for a forecast. That's the one thing you do.
Good
Yeah.
luck with some of them who can't
Yeah.
plan for those things, that's the issue. It's not in the bill of materials, they have to rethink
One
about
of,
how
one,
they're
of, but one of the
planning.
things you can do, and this is where a lot of third-party manufacturers are moving towards. Third-party manufacturing, with whatever company you're working with, where you're relying on a third-party manufacturer for supplying you what you need, they really have to be an extension of the company yourself. You have to know what their capabilities are. You have to know their OEE rates. It should be an extension of the company. You should have an equal flow. It shouldn't be just like, I'm going to place a PO out there and hopefully it'll come in time and I'm just roll the dice. There should be a relationship there with those third-party manufacturers that whenever demand changes come up, you're meeting weekly and you give them as far in advance as you can to give them the lead time you need to get those items. But it really starts with a good forecast of some sort, a good demand plan. And what you're talking about, if it's not on the bill of material, then they have to come up with something. There's a demand on that item out there somewhere. Someone has to measure it and tell me when I get down to this level, I need to reorder it, and whatever that economic order quantity is that they got, that's how it's managed. Again, it may not be the most efficient way to do it, but you have to have something where you're measuring the demand.
Thank you.
Okay, so getting back to the presentation here. After you have all that, as I said, the bottom line here is this is bottom-up approach, and once you layer in all this information, you can build your summarized inventory target that you present to whoever wants to know, including the CFO, VP of Sales, CEO, whoever wants to know, and that's what you're marching to. It's a bottom-up approach, agreement with both sales and finance, and what is acceptable for fill rates and inventory carrying costs. Okay, everyone take a deep breath.
We're doing fine, Jeff.
Yeah, I know, this is the part where I put you guys to sleep. All right, so I'm going to try to break down this formula. I like the KISS philosophy. I'm going to try to break down this formula as simple as possible. I'm not going to go into incredible amounts of details with the formula because you guys can play around with it in the utility that I gave you, and the information is right there in Excel. But when the quiz that I gave you at the beginning, here it is again for the information that you need. You need your supply variability. How reliable is your supply network that you're asking? If you have something that runs every 30 days, is it off plus or minus 3 days? That would be 10%. Is it off more than that? How reliable is that supply? Putting that in as one of the variabilities in the equation helps you calculate your safety stock. Demand variability, also known as forecast error. You need to know what you have for your supply, your demand plan, and how you actually perform to that. And it's a component standard deviation of demand, but again, breaking it down as simple as possible for you, you have a forecast and you have what you actually shipped. If you can measure that, you can use this utility.
Joe, this is SKU level?
SKU level. Bottom-up approach, SKU level up. And again, the reason we use SKU level to do this is because it's more flexible on the day. You can take that and you can slice and dice it, you can group it. It's the best way to do it. To do it at the SKU level is the way to make it most efficient.
Joe?
Yes?
I mean, one of the things is, it's great when you can do bottom up, but I can't tell you how many organizations I've seen where it's top-down driven. You get the CFO who says, if they're in charge of working capital, they'll say, this is what the number has to be. And then you're in a seeking mode because you know how many new product launches, I guess that refers to one of the areas in your triangle.
Yep.
You know, the new product launches, you want to have plenty of inventory to protect your new product launches if they do, assuming they do well. But the difficulty is, you know, how you sort of work it top down and
Okay, I can tell you how to do that. So you've done all the legwork at the item level, right? And there is a major discrepancy from what the top level. Remember at the beginning I said one of the challenges NicePack has? NicePack has this challenge where, yesteryear at NicePack had the challenge where, again, operations and finance are marching at two different beats. And that's what you're describing. And you're sitting there saying that, look, we need to keep our customers in stock. Finance is telling me, we can't afford to. So there has to be some sort of agreement. If you demonstrate this and you understand what the understand what the formula means and why I need to keep this inventory on hand to supply them. It's a matter of either convincing finance that you need to have this to keep your customers in stock, and you get the backup from sales, CEO, CFO. You need to be able to support your customers if you want to make business. If it's still too much, then what you can do with this bottom-up approach is start changing the dynamics of it. You say, okay, we can only support 95% customer service level. Are we willing to sign up for that? And that will help lower your inventory. Again, the inventory multiplier that I talked about, that customer service level has a huge impact on what your safety stock goals need to be. But they have to agree. You're comfortable with being out of stock 5% of the time. Other things you can do in the operations planning world and supply is like, well, in order to do this, you need to get your forecast error up to 85%. That might be unrealistic in a CPG type environment. Or you might need to lower your cycle times from 60 to 30 days. All of these have an impact to lower your potential inventory carrying costs, but you have to be realistic in whether or not those goals are achievable. So I understand your pain, I feel it, I've been there, I knew that, but one of the things we do now is at the beginning of the year, and this is a fluid, understand that inventory targets aren't fixed. You can come up with something as it stands right now, but 6 months, if you pick up new customers, you lose customers, all of those goals might change. So you need to redo this exercise and say, okay, 6 months ago we said our inventory target needed to be this. Now, because of the changes in the environment, on the customer environment, what we're doing, it's now this. So again, I feel your pain, but if you're armed with the data, you're armed with the why I need to keep this information, then that helps you out. That's the best I can offer you. So, I understand what you're saying. They come out and they say that it needs to be this. And then you can argue back and say, I say it needs to be this. And then you can segment that inventory. If you have a lot of non-performing inventory, that's part of that equation. What are you doing to get rid of it? If you have, and then the rest of it is just a matter of saying, what are you willing to tolerate with the customer? Total supply lead time is referred to as performance cycle in here. Again, we talked about your cycle time plus anything else. If you've got quality hold, it says, when I place a PO to get more inventory, how long does it take before it's available to the customer? You need to know that. And your desired customer service level or inventory multiplier is expressed as a Z-score. I didn't give credit to one guy. A lot of this information that I got came from here, Peter King. He wrote this book a couple years back, Lean for the Process Industries. It's a technical read, but it's a great book in terms of if you're in a manufacturing environment, how to best how to make things better. And Lean is all the rave these days. It's great. It's great if you understand the calculations and what they're saying to improve the manufacturing environment. It is a great read. And I got a lot of the information from here, and so again, desired cycle service level, also referred to as the inventory multiplier, Z-score. You've got 95%. This is represented. This is a graphical representation of a 95% service level, meaning that 50% of your cycles out there, when plugging these numbers in, you won't even hit your min. Another 45% cycles out there, you'll dip into your safety stock, but you shouldn't go out of stock. And then 5% of your cycles out there, you'll have a situation where you will not be able to supply the customer when you're using a 95% service level. Min, max, average, all that is graphically represented here pretty nicely. Here is a graphical representation of your Z-score. When I said it's an exponential relationship, there it is right there. And this is what your percentage levels for cycles for customer service, how it represents as the multiplier that you apply to the formula. So I'm going to go through here. You've got, with all of this calculation, again, I'm going to glaze through this because you guys can write me to get this in Excel. This formula has all the components to it that we discussed at the beginning. You've got your Z-score, that's your desired customer service level. your cycle time or total lead time, time increment that you're using to calculate your standard deviation demand. Do you measure your forecast in 30 days, weekly, or whatever? Do you put that number in there as well? And your standard deviation of demand, that's your forecast error. There's a supply variability component. Again, you have your z-score. You have your standard deviation of lead time. That is your demand or supply variability that you put in there. And your average demand that you put in there. What is your average forecast over a period of time that will help you calculate this number? This is what it looks like all together. The main thing that you have to remember in this formula that makes it the easiest way to break down is that your safety stock level equals your desired customer service level with a demand variability component plus a supply variability component. That's what you get out of any of this. If you don't take anything else away from all this formula, remember that. Desired customer service level, a demand variability or forecast error, and supply variability. Again, yeah, I know. So this is where it starts getting pretty complicated. But again, if you use the tool that we have, it breaks it down much simpler than this. This is just the details of what it would be if you're trying to figure this out on the most basic of levels. I call it basic, but it looks pretty complex, right? Your monthly demand of 1,000 cases. Try to use easy increments. You have 1,000 cases as your forecast. And you have your standard deviation of demand, monthly demand, measured in cases, would be 200. Z-score, 1.65. That equals 95% from the scale that we grabbed or saw at the other slide. Production cycle, 30 days plus 1 day in transit. That's 31 days for a total lead time. And your supply variability, 10%, 3 days. You plug it in here, that's what the numbers that come out at the end. Again, I'm not going to sit there. I've actually applied this to Robert. He reached out to me about a week ago. He's like, this is great. I want to send you some data that will allow you to plug this in. Or I asked for the data if I could use it as an example, and he agreed. So I masked the data, so I'm not putting his business out there, this company. But I want to show you how this applies in real life. So as you start rolling it up, these are the fictitious numbers right here. You plug in these numbers, and when you get all the data in this Excel utility, or the formula we went through, it starts telling you a story. This is what your inventory carrying costs as a min, a max, and an average. But let us go to the case study. So you got a company who's trying to optimize container quantities to a customer, optimizing the demand cycle, while also optimizing inventory levels. The current situation demonstrates an uneven order push to optimize the container overstocking levels. So they have an issue where they want to continue to supply their customer, but how they're building containers and so on, it leads to a very uneven amount of safety stock amongst those items. My task here was to determine the ideal safety stock levels based off the inputs provided. So on each of these SKUs, I plug this into the utility. It tells, with all the inputs he gave me, the big blue bar here is what his current inventory level is. The orange represents where the max should be based off of the inputs. The red represents where the min should be, and the green is where average. On the potential inventory reduction from average that I calculated on this one SKU is $34,000. $93,000 on SKU B. $109,000 on SKU C. Product D, $81,000. And product E, $196,000. He didn't have a lot of demand variability on his items. And even if we talk about bringing in the container optimization portion of this exercise, there's huge potential savings here by applying the science of what your inventory should be. The sum of all of this, if you had product F was $25,000. You might have items where you don't want to carry any inventory at all. And the result would be this big blue bar way, way lower than what it should be, if that's your current inventory stocking level. And that would recommend you need to carry more inventory if you want to keep your customer service levels where you want them to be. So this could go the other direction too. But just with this data, they have just too much, and they have a lot of potential there to reduce their inventory. Product G, $59,000. Anyway, between all of these items, you had a potential for $600,000 savings on that SKU set alone. Again, even if you start plugging in the container optimization for this, where you might have to raise your max up a little bit more, there's still huge potential here to save money. All right, so after you've done all this work, and you sit down and you developed, we talked about where we were we got all the individual line data and min-max targets converting to dollars and standard costs. You grouped your inventory together. You might want to group them by customer, whatever. This helps you determine if you have to tweak your customer service goals or something along those lines to help best service the company in their supply plan. And then you layer in all the other outputs. Again, we talked about the obsolescent inventory that doesn't have any type of movement against it. You have to layer that in to give you your summarized inventory target. There's other considerations. We talked about this at the beginning. So cycle quantity versus forecast. There's always exceptions. Always exceptions that you have to consider. One of them that you have to consider is that there's going to be a minimum buy quantity, an economic order quantity, something that may go against what the min-max suggests. So that should be picked up in calibration. If you're sitting down with everybody and saying, hey, these SKUs, you don't need more than 30 days of inventory on. And they look at the number and it's 1,000 widgets of something. And the plant's looking at that and saying, yeah, but when we run this, we're going to run at least 5,000 cases. We wouldn't run 1,000. It doesn't make sense to run 1,000. So that's something you have to consider, and it affects your max. That would be something that you consider that would be override the formula and say, I got to run up to 1,000. The min can stay where it is, but your average and max will go up. Highly variable demand cycles. They're more difficult to catch, and it skews the z-score. So when I say highly variable demand cycles, let's say you measure your forecast accuracy within a month, but you've got certain customers out there that come in and order 90% of their forecast week 1, and they order 10% for the rest of the month. And demand managers are sitting back, smoking a cigarette, saying, this is great, I got 100% forecast accuracy on that. Meanwhile, because they run the item every 2 to 3 weeks, and you're saying it's 100% forecast accuracy, you're still running into out-of-stock situations because the min-max might be somewhere between 7 and 14 days. Well, they took 3 weeks of inventory on week 1, and if they go any further, and you got another 2 weeks before you produce it again, then you're going to have a bad out-of-stock situation. On instances like this, it's a good idea to measure what your forecast, how you're measuring your forecast within the month. It might be prudent to push 90% of that forecast into week 1, or skewing the forecast so that they can better plan, or you measure your forecast accuracy on the weekly level instead of the monthly level. Proper measurement of the key data inputs. You got to properly measure your forecast. You got to properly measure your fill rates. You have to have the right data inputs in order to make this work. And production capacity. There's going to be a lot of instances where you're preparing for, let's say, a large, you're preparing for a large promotion of some sort, and it far exceeds the capacity of what your production lines can do, or what your third-party manufacturer can do. You would build inventory prior to that would go way above your max in some instances to support that type of activity, and that just requires proper planning and the proper amount of time to make sure that you can support those types of instances. So we talked about benchmarking success. So these are different reports that we use. I've masked the data so that you don't see the actual numbers. But these are different types of reports that we use and KPIs to measure the success of how we're doing. So the total inventory profile against target. This is one way to do it. It's not the best just to take a snapshot and say, all right, here we are. But it's one way you can do it. You can measure where your target is on everything and say, how are you doing against what you said your plan was. One of the ones one of the ones you have inventory projections against target. So this one's a little bit better. If you could do inventory projections, measure your supply and demand going forward against a target. Notice on this one, it's changed throughout this, over time. That's because we had a change in our customer. We picked up new customers or new SKUs, so that we increased our target to match what it was supposed to be. And again, the projections are a good way to measure it. This one I like in particular. If you're trying to delegate, and if you have a lot of buyer planners out there, and you want them to share in your pain in managing inventory, your percentage of items between min-max. So if they're responsible for a certain supplier or a certain production line or whatever, and they're the ones responsible for planning that, you can benchmark that and say, okay, now that I've got my min-max targets, how are we doing against, how is that line doing, how is that supplier doing against those targets, and how many items do you have that are between the min-max, that are over and under. So that's a good measurement. The one in blue is the items that you have between the min-max, the red is over and the blue is under, I believe. So this is a good way to get involvement, segment the responsibilities so that it breaks down to the lowest level possible. My favorite is inventory turns. Inventory turns is where it's really at. If you have an inventory turn goal, and you can derive that from the total inventory target, just pick a calculation that you use and stick with it to measure your inventory turns. If you say that your inventory turns for the year are supposed to be 7, no matter what happens in that changing environment, the inventory turns is always going to be 7. So you can float your inventory up $10 million or whatever, or 15% or whatever it is. If you have the sales to support that and your inventory turns stay the same, then in my book, you're still successful. You're measuring what, you're still moving through inventory at an appropriate level. But a lot of times, the CFO a lot of these guys are fixed on single numbers. But the turns is where the inventory health really is. And the last one, which is where all the money is customer service level. How are you supporting your customer? That's all sales cares about. They're going to come in and say, I need 100 widgets or 1,000 widgets. Are you supplying me 1,000 widgets? So that's a very important metric, and that's really where determines a lot of your success. Okay, so try to blow through that as fast as I could. What are you guys' questions?